Thank you for joining us for our first webinar of the year of 2026, Coffee with Sarah Charters and Jim Simpson. My name is Jess Smith. I'm the Foundation's Communications Content Manager and delighted to have you all here today. So Sarah, Jim, and I are all in different places today, but I'm going to do a land acknowledgement from Mississauga, where I am. And I acknowledge that the lands which constitute the present-day city of Mississauga as being part of the treaty and traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat and Wyandot nations. I recognize these peoples and their ancestors as people who inhabited these lands since time immemorial. And as an organization, the Foundation is actively working towards reconciliation, which is one of our named priorities, by confronting our past and present, providing space for Indigenous peoples within their territory, recognizing and upholding their treaty rights, and supporting Indigenous people. So we have a packed agenda today. Sarah and Jim have a lot to share about the ongoing Centennial Legacy campaign, the Foundation's anti-racism journey, impact investing, a granting update, some news about our new way of working, and a lot more. For those of you who may not know Sarah and Jim, Sarah Charters is the president of the United Church of Canada Foundation, and she'll be entering her 20th year with the organization this year. Sarah's a member of Kingston Road United Church in Toronto. And Jim Simpson has been chair of the Foundation Board of Directors for 2 years now. In June of last year, in conjunction with his move to Ontario, Jim wrapped up terms serving Pacific Mountain Region's Community of Faith Support Council, 3 Point Housing Society, and the Naramata Centre Society. Jim is a member at Avondale United Church in Stratford, Ontario. So I'm going to pass it over to Jim and Sarah now, and we'll all sit and listen.
Thanks so much, Jess. That's a great intro, and thank you everybody so much for coming and for making time for us today. It really is great to be here with you all. It's also nice to have time to reflect, to carve out that space to think about 2025, which was a really busy year. We do have, as Jess said, lots to share about that, and sort of maybe a bit of a sneak peek at what work continues and what we're working on throughout 2026. One of those pieces that we started and continues to go on, Jess mentioned, the Centennial Legacy campaign. It's a campaign to encourage folks across the church to think about putting gifts in their will, bequests, and other estate plans for the ministries they care about. And so far, individuals and congregations have committed $15 million to the campaign, which is fantastic. And communities of faith are participating in many ways, the ways that make sense for them, and we're doing our best to support them in whatever that action looks like. So some folks made outright gifts to contribute to that 15 million. Some communities of faith set up endowment funds. And then the rest of that is from folks who created those bequests and gifts in their will for their congregations, for the foundation, for mission and service. And it's really just a fantastic showing of the faith that folks have that there will be a church in the future, and that they want to contribute to that, carrying it on. So this year we have already many congregations that are launching conversations, events, and campaigns to encourage folks within their midst to create those special gifts. And one of the really nice things about that I've seen is that we have campaign support forums where folks from those congregations working on this come together. They share their experiences, they learn from each other. We can provide them with some sort of technical support for anything they need. And it's been a really beautiful way for folks across the church to connect. And there were actually many ways that folks across the church connected for the centennial. Jim and I both had the amazing opportunity to be in St. John's last June to celebrate many events there and the worship at Gower Street. Jim, do you want to give your impressions of
Sure.
that?
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you all again for being part of this and keen to hear what's going on at the foundation. Yeah, I mean the words I think that come to mind are color, joy. It really showed the diversity of the church. And I was and hopefully it transpired because I know a lot of people did watch it on Zoom and but when you're in the space, just the vibrancy and the color. And I couldn't help but think back. And granted, it's a long time ago, but when I was a little kid at a church in Vancouver, and it was similar age to the one at Gower in St. John's, it was built around 1900. I can remember as a kid sitting there with my grandmother. She'd have a hat on and gloves because that's what you did then. You looked up, and the minister was a man, and he was way high up, wearing black. And it just struck me as so polar opposite to where we find ourselves today and what that celebration was. I think it was a celebration that had tons of joy and tons of things to celebrate and some lament to talk about because we don't always get everything right. But it really showed the diversity, and it was an opportunity for leaders from across the nation of our church to come together, and it was a great opportunity to talk with some of them. And talking with folks like Mitchell Anderson, who's minister at St. Paul's in Saskatoon, and his experiences. It was really great. And it also, when I think of Mitchell, I think of the webinars the foundation has done. I think there's about 17 that were done last year. If I'm hoping many of you have seen them, I really encourage you to check those out. Mitchell did one on the work he's done at St. Paul's in Saskatoon and the church growth, and just to see young leaders be so excited about what they're doing. It's a great experience. And when we talk about leaders, the other thing that comes to mind last year, the foundation was one of the key supporters of Regenerate, that leadership development program Mitch was part of, along with a number of others, and really shows that commitment to how we need to grow our leaders, how we need to support our leaders. And one of the things they've done is, as Sarah was talking about, the new funds that were created last year. One of them is called the Blazing Walnuts, which came out of the leaders at Regenerate, where Mitchell created this fund to help pay forward for leaders. So there was just some great examples, I think, there of how the foundation can grow and support so much key work. Sarah, what else comes to mind when you think of either the centennial or the leadership events?
Yeah, I think, Jim, that last piece that you said about how the group, there was about 30 leaders, young leaders from across the church in a variety of roles, some in pastoral ministries, some working with regions, some in other ministries across the church. That group and that commitment to supporting leaders and equipping them for the context that we find ourselves in now, I think, is so important. And part of what the foundation has been working on in terms of the current context, and what we named as a priority in our strategic plan, was to embed diversity, equity, and inclusion in all that we do. And as Jess mentioned, we did name a priority as reconciliation with our Indigenous siblings and partners, and also to become an anti-racist organization. And both those things are journeys that we need really good leadership to help us along those paths. And so as we were thinking about how the foundation might contribute to that, we decided to conduct a racial equity audit. And so that was over the spring last year, and we engaged the board and the staff and a variety of stakeholders in that research to explore, our overall commitment and understanding of anti-racism, how that was showing up in how we communicated and what we communicated, what that looked like in terms of governance and granting. And it was a really great experience to do that deep dive and to see those places where we'd made some progress but needed to make more. So we are starting to implement the recommendations from that. For example, one of the recommendations was to actually define what we mean by anti-racism in terms of our granting and what we're looking for in grant applications. So we were able to put that up on the website, ready for granting going forward. It also recommended that we continue to work to increase diverse representation across our leadership, our staff, our boards, our committees, and to continue to create opportunities for learning and conversation around anti-racism. So those are all very important things, and we'll be working those into our plans going forward. And really excited about what that will mean for the future of the foundation, and how that might support other ministry. It wasn't part of the audit to look at our investments in terms of anti-racism, but we do have regular conversations with our investment managers about how our values and our priorities are reflected in our investments. The investment committee and the board talk about that also. And those are always very good conversations and very constructive. As well as chairing the board, Jim is also on our investment committee. And so I'd turn it over to you, Jim, to sort of talk about that perspective.
Sure. Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, so we ended last year with just around 118 million assets under our management that we take seriously the stewardship of, to invest well, to grow so that we can be supporting the grants and fulfilling our purpose. Of that 118, about 110 was with Fiera Management Firm, and that's our more traditional part of the portfolio. And then just under 8 was with Genis, which is a firm where we're doing what was called impact investing. And that's really taking a deep dive and working with Genis to look at it. And they look at what our priorities are, climate justice, anti-racism, the reconciliation pieces that Sarah was just talking about, and find companies that really marry up with that. And then we're actually investing directly in those companies. So right now there's about 9 active investments. When you're working with these, there's a tremendous amount of due diligence that Genis and their professionals do that leads in and through this whole process. It's a much deeper dive and a longer term commitment you're looking at compared to sort of the traditional investing, but it's ways to really address a difference. 2 of the examples, just if people are curious, Raven Indigenous Capital Partners is a firm that we've invested in through the impact investing. They have projects that focus in 2 areas. One is climate, and one of those examples would be where they've installed a firm where they're installing 125 geothermal exchange units in First Nation communities, as well as health. And one of the projects that our investment is helping to support is a project aimed at mitigating type 2 diabetes, as it is, disproportionately affecting First Nation communities. Another one, Windmill Microlending, and they provide loans to immigrants so that they can achieve their Canadian accreditation. And again, we want to bear in mind that these are investments, these aren't grants. We earn return. It's a longer term thing you're looking at. So that's one of the things that when we look to next year, and that's one of the things we want to highlight too in our session today, is we are doing a full review of actually both investment management firms. It's when you're a steward of the sort of assets we are, it is something you want to be doing every 3 to 5 years or something like that. So we're hired an outside firm. They're going to do that. And in particular, to look at the impact one, it's, as I said, timelines are different. So we really want to make sure we're still acting in the best way we can in it. But it's an exciting piece. So we'll see what comes of that next year, and probably be talking to you about it next January at this time. On some of the stuff you would have seen, we used Micah and about acting justly and loving mercy, and I think this impact investing is one of the ways we do that, act justly, where we can take these funds, a portion of these funds we're stewarding, and invest directly in areas that we know need some redressing from a justice standpoint. So it's really exciting to see that moving along. Of course, another way that we can act out the justice and the love mercies through our granting program. And Sarah, maybe can you share some highlights from this last year on the granting program?
Yeah, for sure. Um, and, the investing is what makes this granting possible. And the granting may actually be the thing the foundation is best known for. 2024 was actually the first year that we were able to make grants of more than $10 million. And in 2025, the number is closing in on 11 million. It was about 10.8 million in grants over the course of the year. And both in terms of the assets under management and the amount of grants we make is not at all about how great the foundation is. Look at what we're doing. But it's about the generosity of United Church people who have given those resources freely and with the intent to support ministry. And the folks who have made grant applications, who really sort of put themselves out there, often outside of their comfort zone, to say, we want to try something new, we want to try something different, and we need help. And so, only about 10%, 1.2 million of those grants come through that application-based program that we have. And so the rest is by United Church folks who have given money for specific ministries, for mission and service, for their congregation, to really make a difference in the life of the church. So, we're really grateful just to be able to facilitate that generosity. Because when you think about that as a whole, that is something that is truly amazing. And to think about the granting program, that $1.2 million, that was split out into 193 different grants. 59 in support of centennial celebrations, 81 through the Seeds of Hope program, which is very broad and allows congregations to do those sort of new, innovative ministry pieces. 25 scholarships to help support leaders as they either train for their role in ministry or hone their skills through professional development. There were 8 grants that were from our promotion fund, graciously created by an individual who is passionate about having congregations connect with their communities and share the work they do. We made 19 trust-based grants, which are more about the organization and the overall work it does, as opposed to a particular project. And we also made 1 grant from our United Church Health Services Society fund, which is a legacy fund from that organization that used to work out west, but that closed about over 10 years ago now. So that foresight from then is still supporting ministry now. The other thing I'd say about our grants is that there is much thoughtful and careful discernment and oversight by the Joint Grants Committee, its advisors, and the board. The Joint Grants Committee, reviewed all of those applications and the others that we weren't able to fund, and made the recommendations. And the board it always generates a lot of conversation to see what's coming up, to see what are the themes, and to really think about, in this time and place, how can we best serve the church through those grants? And so there's many conversations about that, particularly at the board's in-person meeting that happened last September. Was a fantastic piece. And again, Jim, I'm going to ask you if you want to say it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the board meets 4 times, I think, a year, and all the other ones, the 3 are just done virtually. There's environmental impacts and cost impacts, but it is really important when we can once a year get together in person. You just have a different level of dialogue, both in sort of the formal parts of the meeting, but in the the walking to the meeting and the sitting over lunch and all those times. It's really great. And Victoria, so we were in Victoria this year. We also use it as a way to get to different parts of where the church is. So we can also tie in some, donor relations and to meet with some of the people who've received our grants. So, when we were in Victoria in September, we had some great conversations. We had two people come in, Rob Crosby Shears, who's a minister based in Victoria, and he really focuses. He's got a local community of faith, but he does a lot of work with church planting for the region, Pacific Mountain region, and also Trina Duncan, who's executive minister of the Pacific Mountain region. And we had some great conversations around, you know, church planting and new church starts and what that means and what that can look like. And and as probably many of you have either been aware of the Toward 2035 or have read it, there's lots in there, and there's lots that isn't great as far as where we might see ourselves in 2035. But there are some amazing stories of what's being created. And so it was great hearing from Trina and Rob about that, and also the focus on leadership development. I'd say I'm not biased, but I probably am. But I spent most of my time out in the Pacific Mountain region area, and they really have taken leadership development to heart for, I'm going to say, at least 10 years, and it might be more. And so it was really great to be in conversation about that. And then the other thing we did, which I mentioned, we go out to see some people who received the grants. So both where we actually met was in the old First Met, which is now no longer has an active community of faith that was First Met, but it's used for meetings, it's used for some smaller congregations, and that's where both Abbey Church and Emmaus community are. So we could hear some of the work and experiences they're having. These are newer communities of faith, different in how they're approaching it. And so it was great to hear those stories. And then we also went out to Our Place. And Our Place is in Victoria, and they offer wraparound support for people facing homelessness, mental illness challenges, substance abuse, poverty, and social isolation. And, when you talk about love, mercy, and act humbly, and to go over there to see the work they do is just amazing. And working with the folks that are in various levels on the street and how they can approach and just be present for that is amazing. And it's also, and I think back to the centennial celebration and the impact the church has had. And this Our Place, it's an incorporated ministry. It started as a community of faith wanting to do some work. And today when you walk by, you'd have no idea that it had anything to do with the church. So just the level of impact that our church has had, is having, and will have, that's what's really exciting about it. So it was just a great experience. And then as we sort of look to some of the ways we're looking at this year, Sarah, what else do you want to share as far as either wrapping up from this last year or into 26, whatever year it is?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, we are already almost coming to the end of our time together. So, but there are two things I do want to touch on. And they actually both started last year, but continue into this year in one way or the other. And that is, first, pretty much since the foundation's beginning, we've always had what we call a relationship agreement with the General Council Office. Because as two national bodies, we want to make sure that we're working together well, we're not duplicating efforts, and that we each know very clearly what our roles are and who is responsible for what. So over the years, on a regular basis, we've revisited that and taken a look at the context we find ourselves in each time we go to do that. And there's always been some changes. This one was such a constructive and wonderful, faithful conversation, and really thinking through with where the church is going and the Toward 2035 work, how we want to share that load. And so January 1st, 29 days ago now, was the start of this new one. So the foundation is taking on some new responsibilities to lighten the load for the General Council Office. well, so that they have that space to work on 2035. And as part of that, we're still in conversation over the next 6 or so months to see what those first steps the church is going to take on that journey towards 2035. Because as Jim mentioned, like if you look at the scenario when we do nothing, it's not a good one. But we have the opportunity as the entire church to do something now to change that. And so as the church, the general council and the regional council offices figure out what those first steps are, the foundation is also trying to figure out how we can come alongside and be a good partner in that. Because as I said before, our focus is really on that long-term horizon, the 10, the 25, the 50 years out, and how we can provide support for sustainable, thriving ministry. So just a couple of small pieces of work for the year, but I think something that we're very excited to take on. And Jim, I don't know if you have anything else.
Yeah, yeah, certainly just affirming those things, but also just to say, when I talk about use example Victoria and we come up with all these great new ideas, someone actually has to make them work. And it's Sarah and her team that do that. So I'd be remiss if not saying there's a huge, deep sense of gratitude, certainly the board feels for Sarah and the staff as they live out this mission and ministry. So that for sure I want to make mention of. And yeah, I think it's just there's just so much excitement when you're in some of these things, the leaders that are out there, and I know there's many challenges, but there's also excitement. So how can we support that? How can we grow that? That's really what we're looking to, and we have our part to play. And of course, all of you who are on the call today, and can then take these messages hopefully back to your communities of faith. The foundation still walks this thing where some people know lots about us and lots of people know nothing about us. So the more we can all be actively talking about the foundation and the support we need and can provide, it's just great. So yeah, no, I really appreciate this opportunity to share a bit with you about what we've been up to.
Thank you, Jim. And I would say, I mean, it's an amazing staff team that we have at the foundation, and we're always happy to hear from folks. Ideas, thoughts, questions. Please don't hesitate to get in touch. I'm sure that somebody is going to put our email address. Oh, we can't do it in the chat. We'll send it in the follow-up information. We'll send it in the follow-up information. And I just want to express gratitude for each and every one of you, for making time that you did today to be with us, for all of the ways you've contributed to the foundation, to mission and service, to your local communities of faith. As a church, the world really needs us. And you're a big part of that, so thank you. Jess is ready to jump in and save me there. I was going to offer a prayer, but Jess, do you have any closing things before that?
No, just thank you to everyone, and watch your email for the recording link. We have lots of great webinars coming up this year as well, so watch for those too.
Thank you.
Back to you, Sarah.
All right, folks, if we could just close in prayer. Loving God, as we go from this gathering, let us go knowing that we are not alone. You are with us, and we have each other. Thank you for this day and the opportunity to gather. May we be bold in living out our discipleship together. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks, folks. Enjoy the rest of your day.